The morning sunlight glared through the glass towers of the Whitestone Corporation, painting the marble floors in streaks of gold. Employees hurried through the revolving doors, clutching their coffees and muttering greetings that were half-hearted at best. Somewhere above them, in the topmost office overlooking the city, Alexander White Estonia CEO, billionaire, and self-proclaimed genius was already yelling at his assistant. "Why is this report incomplete?" His voice was sharp, like the crack of ice. "Do I pay people here to waste my time or to deliver results?" The assistant, a nervous young man, stammered an apology, clutching a stack of papers that shook in his trembling hands. Alexander sighed dramatically, ran a hand through his slick-back hair, and turned toward the panoramic window. "Fix it, I don't care how." Downstairs, the janitorial staff was finishing their morning rounds. Among them was Evelyn Cartera, a quiet woman in her late 20s, dressed in a faded gray uniform and worn sneakers. She moved with the calm precision of someone who had long learned not to draw attention. Evelyn had been working at Whitestone Corp for 2 years. No one really noticed her, except when a trash can overflowed or a spill appeared. She was invisibly a background blur in the grand performance of the company's elite. That morning, as she mopped the lobby, she heard the same rumor echoing among the employees. The new AI-based logistics system had crashed again. It was a multi-million-dollar project Alexander himself had spearheaded. Investors were furious. The board was panicking. Evelyn didn't mean to listen, but she had studied computer science before life had pulled her off that path. A scholarship had vanished when her father fell ill, and she had taken up any job she could to pay for his hospital bills. That was 3 years ago. Since then, the mop had replaced the keyboard. At noon, chaos broke out in the upper floors. The system failure had spread and now shipments were delayed worldwide. Alexander stormed into the control room with his top engineers. "Tell me you fixed it," he snapped. "Sir," said one of them, voice quivering, "we're trying, but the algorithm keeps looping. We can't find the corrupted source file." Alexander laughed bitterly. "So, my best engineers can't fix a system I paid millions for?" "Incredible." He loosened his tie and smirked. "If one of you nobodies could fix this mess, I'd marry them on the spot." Laughter filled the room, a tense, uncomfortable laughter. The janitor's cart squeaked at the doorway. Evelyn froze, caught halfway into the room with her mop. She had only come to empty the bins, but now every eye was on her. "You lost, Miss Carter?" Alexander asked, sarcasm ripping from every syllable. "No, sir, just cleaning." "Well, clean up later. This is a war room, not a janitor's closet." Something inside her twitched. Maybe it was pride, maybe exhaustion, or maybe she was just tired of being invisible. "I might be able to help," she said quietly. The room went silent. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Help you?" He chuckled. "What, you're going to wipe the bugs away with your mop?" Laughter erupted again, this time louder. Evelyn didn't flinch. She looked at him steadily, her hazel eyes calm but determined. "Try me," she said. "If I fix it, you marry me." "That's what you said, right?" the engineers gasped. Alexander leaned back, amused. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that." "Fine, sweetheart, fix it, and I'll keep my word. But when you fail, you mop this entire floor for a month without pay." "Deal." She set down her mop, walked to the main console, and studied the screen. The engineers exchanged awkward glances, some smirking, others pitying her. But Evelyn wasn't bluffing. She had written similar code during her university years. The pattern of corruption she saw wasn't random, it was the result of a recursive trigger hidden in the auto-update function. Within minutes, she navigated deeper into the system. Her fingers danced across the keys. Alexander's smirk slowly faded. The screen flickered, then lines of code began to align properly. "What is she doing?" one engineer whispered. "She's debugging manually," another said in disbelief. "But that's impossible at this scale." 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, Evelyn hit enter. The red warning screens disappeared. The system dashboard turned green. A cheerful chime echoed through the room. System restored. Operations normal. No one moved. Then one of the engineers shouted, "It's fixed." She actually did it. The room exploded into stunned applause. Evelyn stepped back, wiping a bit of dust from her hands. "You're welcome," she said softly. Alexander stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. His arrogance faltered, replaced by confusion and something else. Admiration, maybe. "How did you do that?" he demanded. "It wasn't complicated," she replied. "Just overlooked logic." Sometimes, people ignore the simplest solutions because they think they're too smart to see them. Her tone was polite, but the jab was unmistakable. The engineers stifled grins. Alexander's jaw tightened. Then, to everyone's shock, he laughed a real laugh, rich and unguarded. "You're something else, Miss Carter." He extended a hand. "A deal's a deal, isn't it?" The room gasped again. Evelyn blinked. "You were serious?" "I'm a man of my word," Alexander said, smirking. "Unless you're too scared to hold me to it." She folded her arms. "I'm not scared, but I don't marry arrogant men who treat people like dirt." The laughter this time wasn't cruel, it was shocked admiration. Alexander's face turned crimson, then softened. "You've got fire," he said quietly. "I like that." From that day on, things changed. Evelyn was promoted not as a charity case, but because Alexander realized her potential. He created a new position for her in the cybersecurity department. At first, people whispered it was favoritism, but when Evelyn detected and prevented a massive data breach 2 months later, no one doubted her anymore. Alexander watched her work, fascinated. The arrogance that once defined him began to fade. He started arriving earlier, working harder, even helping the staff he used to ignore. One evening, as they worked late in the empty office, Evelyn looked up from her computer. "You're different now," she said. Alexander smiled faintly. "You taught me something important. That greatness isn't about status it's about humility." She smiled. "You finally learned to listen." He chuckled. "And I'm still waiting for you to collect on that deal." Evelyn laughed. "You mean the marriage thing? That was a joke." "Maybe for you, but I haven't laughed like that in years. You made me realize I was missing something real." She turned away, her cheeks warm. "You're impossible." "Persistent," he corrected. Months passed, and Whitestone Corp thrived under their unlikely partnership. Investors called Alexander a visionary reborn, unaware that his true transformation had come from a janitor who refused to be small. Their relationship evolved slowly from banter to respect, from respect to quiet affection. Evelyn resisted at first, unsure if she could ever belong in his world. But Alexander never treated her like she didn't belong again. One evening, during the company's annual gala, he took the stage to give a speech. Cameras flashed. The crowd buzzed. He began with the usual words about innovation and leadership, but then, his tone changed. "There was a time," he said, "when I thought power meant control, when I thought people's worth depended on their titles. Then someone taught me that real strength comes from humility and kindness." He turned toward the audience, his eyes finding Evelyn's across the room. She stood near the back, still in her modest dress, her eyes wide. Alexander smiled. "Evelyn Carter, will you come up here?" The crowd murmured as she hesitated, then slowly stepped forward. When she reached him, he took her hand and knelt. "I once made a ridiculous promise in arrogance," he said. "Now, I make it again with sincerity. Will you marry me?" The room went silent. Evelyn's heart pounded. She stared at him, the man who had once mocked her, now kneeling before her with honest eyes. Tears filled her eyes. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I want to," he said softly, "because I can't imagine this life without you." She smiled through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The crowd erupted in applause. The same office that had once laughed at her now celebrated her. Their wedding wasn't a grand affair, it was simple, intimate, and full of laughter. Alexander insisted they hold it in the company garden, under the same glass tower where their story had begun. As they exchanged vows, he leaned in and whispered, "You fixed more than a system that day. You fixed me." Evelyn smiled. "And you stopped being the arrogant CEO I once couldn't stand." He chuckled. Fair trade. Years later, people still told the story of the janitor who married the shoddy, the woman who turned a joke into destiny, who reminded everyone that brilliance can hide behind the humblest uniform. And every morning, when Alexander looked across the breakfast table at his wife, he would grin and say, "If you fix it, I'll marry you," just to see her roll her eyes and laugh. Because in the end, what began as arrogance had become love, via the kind that builds, humbles, and transforms. And somewhere in the hum of Whitestone Tower, you could almost still hear the echo of that memento when a janitor shocked everyone, including the man who thought he already had everything.